Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. This is a one-on-one interview. My name is Joe Smith and I'm joined by the Manchester United correspondent for ESPN, Rob Dawson. Very good to have you on the channel again. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very, very good to have you on. We've got loads to talk about. We want to look at this ownership stuff, United's sort of current situation, Ten Hag's current situation, because it seems like, you know, everything's up in the air at the minute. This huge game coming on Sunday, and obviously in 2 weeks the transfer window opens, so we'll be getting into that as well. But let's just start off, just over a week or so ago, or almost 10 days or so ago, this situation that you and a few other journalists sort of found yourself in where, I think it was the 5th of December, we heard the news break in that Manchester United had banned a handful of journalists from the upcoming press conference. Now, this came off the back of a story that I believe you wrote. The first one I saw anyway was your story that sort of suggested that Ten Hag was having a bit of a struggle, or a bit of a, and you can maybe correct my wording of this, a sort of a job on his hands, keeping certain squad players on his side. Now that then, in the following articles, became 50% of the team. That became, there's a mutiny on his hands. It became all these different things. And then the next thing we see is from the outside looking in, is this selection of journalists has been banned from the upcoming press conference. What was that like for you? And what did you make of the reaction to that? Because it was a massive story, obviously, people sort of talking about Sir Alex and things we'd seen before of that nature. Were you surprised at what happened there? And do you have any sort of regrets or feelings about how that all unfolded?
No regrets. First off, I 100% stand by the story.
Yeah.
It was well sourced. ESPN and me and the people on the desk at ESPN took quite a lot of care in how it was presented. Not only the intro and the way it was worded actually in the copy, but also in the way it was headlined, just to make sure that it wasn't too inflammatory. It wasn't a kind of a one-off thing where one person had said one thing and we decided to do a story about it. It had been bubbling for a while, obviously, exacerbated a little bit by what happened at Newcastle a couple of days earlier. I was a little bit surprised that I got banned. I can't speak about the other stories and the other things that came out because they were the responsibility of other journalists. I was a little bit surprised that I was banned, in that in the past, if you write a story that Man United don't like, the phone call that you get is almost immediate.
Right.
In this case, our story went up about 2 o'clock on a Monday. It wasn't until Tuesday morning, quite close to the presser. I was actually sat in my car waiting to go to the presser and get the call from United to kind of explain the decision. So I was a little bit surprised that's the way that it had all unfolded. Again, I felt that we'd taken quite a lot of care in the way that we did it. I know that subsequently there were stories that came out about 50% of the dressing room that were against Ten Hag. Simply that just wasn't in our story. Our story basically was that there was players, not everyone, but players in the dressing room who had concerns, issues ranging from the way that they were asked to train to the way that they were set up on a match day. And again, it's not that they were trying to get the manager sacked. It was simply that they had concerns, and that I felt that deserved reporting. I also took care to make sure that it wasn't just a reflection of the players' side, but there was also a reflection of the staff side or the club side.
Yeah.
Because we wanted it to be accurate and we wanted it to be fair. We didn't want it to be, Ten Hag has got a mutiny on his hands, because that wasn't my information. So having taken that care to do it in the way that we felt was right, I was a little bit surprised at the way it kind of unfolded. Again, a little bit surprised at maybe the reaction to the stuff coming out about the ban, but again, I think it's probably the first not mass banning, but the first time a few journalists have been banned in the age of social media, in that, when Fergie would do it regularly, perhaps it just didn't come out. It would be mentioned in industry circles, but it wouldn't go beyond that. But now, with the focus and the attention that's on United, it becomes a story in itself, which is never my intention. It's one of the first rules of journalism: don't become the story yourself. So it was never my intention to be the focus in that way. Obviously, there's been subsequent conversations with United since, and it's been agreed that I can come back, which I'm grateful for. But again, I've got no regrets about writing the story. I felt it was accurate. I felt it was fair, and 100% stand by it.
And I think, like you said, some of the key phrasing, it's important to, you mentioned that Ten Hag is battling to keep key players on side. Another quote about a group within the first team squad are becoming disillusioned after a 10th defeat of the season. Like you said, there's nothing in there about 50% of the squad or a mutiny or anything like that. And I do think it's interesting, and Steve mentioned it on a video we had on here about, it almost seemed like you sort of got, and this is my opinion entirely, nothing, that you almost got caught in the sort of the crosshairs of Man United that were maybe sort of aimed at how the story had kind of evolved over the next 24 hours. And like you said, you stand by the story. Just on the specific part that United sort of quoted as the reason behind this ban, obviously, about this, not asking them for their opinion on it or a chance to give feedback. Is that something that typically you would do, or is that like you see that in articles a lot? We reached out for comment. Is that something that you maybe wish you should have done, or do you think normally for a story like that it's standard that wouldn't happen?
Yeah, well, no, because if you go to United and United tell you that the sky is pink, and you know yourself it's blue, you haven't got no duty to report what they say.
Yeah.
We were confident in the information that we had. We felt that we'd given United's side through different sourcing. It wasn't a case where this was all just dressing room sources and we were sticking the boot in on behalf of the players. Yeah. That we felt it was balanced because we'd gone to people at United to get their perspective. My job as a journalist is to be accurate and fair, and we felt that we'd achieved that. I mean, I actually think that given the timeline of events, in that our story went up at 2:00 and we didn't get any kind of phone call or any kind of comeback from United until Tuesday morning, 9:30, 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning, I think that shows that even the people at United felt that our story was fair. Obviously, in between our story going up and Tuesday morning, other things then happened that are well out of our control, out of my control and out of ESPN's control. So I feel that my job reporting on United is to be accurate and fair. I thought that story was both of those things. Again, I want to stress that this wasn't a story about the entire dressing room wanting the manager sacked. It wasn't a story about players downing tools and saying we're not going to play for this guy. Nothing like that at all. It was that there were players in the dressing room who had quite specific concerns, and that, I think even Ten Hag mentioned it in the press conference that we were all banned from, that players had gone to him to say,
yeah, he did.
I don't know, advice maybe is the wrong word, but suggestions that he had kind of said, one or two have been to us, and simply our story was a reflection of that. Again, I thought it was accurate. I thought it was fair. I feel that maybe got tarred with the same brush as some of the other stuff that came out about 50% of the dressing room have gone. I mean, again, I don't want to comment on where that stuff came from. Yeah. That just wasn't my information at the time of writing the story. So would I do things differently? Probably not. I thought that I thought it was fair. I thought it was a fair reflection of the mood within the dressing room at the time. Obviously, again, though, United are well within their rights if they think that that something's been done wrong, that they are well within their rights to say, well, you're banned for this press conference. So I completely respect that. But also Man United have to respect our right to report on what is going on at Man United, whether that's positive or negative.
So since obviously that happened, that was 8 days ago, 9 days ago, we've since seen United lose 3-0 at home to Bournemouth, lose and go out of the Champions League and Europe entirely against Bayern Munich. Presumably, this isn't getting much better. Now, obviously, we can all sit here and see that Ten Hag isn't in the strongest position as a manager of Manchester United. What do you see as the future for Ten Hag? Because, he's only 18 months in. We won a trophy. What was it? It's December. 7 months ago, United won a trophy. Yeah. And now it's looking as though a couple of false moves or a battering against Liverpool, and that could be the end of it. Where do you see things now? Because as you mentioned in the article, there's a concern that the mood inside the dressing room will dip even further unless there's an upturn in form soon. Well, we certainly haven't seen much of an upturn.
Yeah, and I mean, the bottom line with all of this is that players hate to lose, right?
Yeah.
We
hope so. Sometimes you're not sure when you're watching it. That's one of the issues.
These concerns don't come out if the team is winning. It happens when they're losing. It's the same as, you know, any team, any club in the world. They just don't like to lose. In terms of what happens with Ten Hag, yeah, I mean he's in a difficult position because it's strange because he had so much credit in the bank after last season. I felt that he did a really good job in the circumstances, and I think the expectation in the summer was that he would kick on, maybe not kick on and challenge for the title and win the Champions League, but just take another step forward. And then if anything, it's gone backwards. Obviously, he's got the issue of the ownership hanging over him. You've got a guy who is going to come in and in theory oversee the football side of the business, and the most important guy on the football side is the manager. So you'd have to think that at some stage Radcliffe is going to come in and look at Ten Hag and go, is he performing in the way that we want, and is there anyone better? And I would like to think that he's going to do that with all the different roles on the football side, and Ten Hag should be no different. I think my personal opinion is that they should stick with him. I'm not as sure of that now as I was 6 weeks ago, because obviously, I don't think that he's had all the tools to make Man United a success under his reign, but I also think that he should have done better with the players and the resources that he's had available. So it's quite a strange situation in that there are other factors, and he's right to point other factors like the ownership and injuries, but there are still games there that he should have done better in. Bournemouth is a perfect example. And to me, that is quite a big worry. I imagine that nothing will happen with the manager until Radcliffe's investment is confirmed, that he needs to come in. He probably needs to do some kind of audit of all the people who are working on the football side and start making these big decisions. That in itself is going to take time. Again, though, it goes back to results. You know, at Man United, you cannot have a situation where you are losing once every 2 weeks. It's just not sustainable. And at that stage, I would really worry for him, because ultimately, all the side issues that loads of fans, and I know you've spoken about on the channel as well, again and again and again, ultimately, it's all decided on the pitch. And if results aren't good, the guy who pays the price is always the manager. And I mean, Erik is a smart bloke, and he'll know that. He'll know that he's vulnerable at the moment, and he's vulnerable until results turn around.
I've noticed with Ten Hag, and it's been sort of mentioned. You mentioned it in that article, and it's been mentioned by other people about Ten Hag going for this quite sort of soft approach against the players, or I say against the players, on the players. Where, you know, even after a loss we saw against Bayern Munich last night, him coming out and saying, I thought the performance was very good. He said a similar thing, I think, against Bournemouth. Some of the, you know, you're watching it thinking, what am I reading here? Now, obviously, to the public and to us, it sort of has a feeling of being slightly deluded almost. Sometimes when you've just lost again, been knocked out of a competition, and you stood there saying, actually, things are good. But you mentioned in that article, and like I said, other people mentioned it, that he's almost sort of decided that the players don't respond well to criticism, and so he's going to be slightly sort of nicer and lighter on them. Is that something that you think might cost him in the long run? Because, yes, he's sparing the blushes of the players. He's not coming out and saying, you know, Scott McTominay didn't track his man. But now he's looking like someone who can't see the game in front of him, and his tactics and his mentality are being questioned. Yeah. Is there a line to find there, do you think?
Definitely, and I think that's a really interesting part of management, because there was definitely a feeling, or is definitely a feeling among the coaching staff, among some of the coaching staff, that the players don't respond well to criticism, in particular public criticism, and everything that brings with it. And so Erik has tried to be a little bit softer in post-match and pre-match press conferences when he's been asked direct questions about individual players. He's not wanted to go into that. He's wanted instead to focus on the collective. I mean, you saw it in Istanbul with the Galatasaray game that Onana doesn't have a great game. Everyone can see that, like it or not, the goalkeeper has cost you that game. And he was asked 2 or 3 direct questions about Onana, and he said, "I'm not going to talk about individual mistakes. I'm going to talk about the collective. Let's talk about why that shot even happens. Why is Andre having to face that shot? Well, it's a breakdown of this here, and there's a breakdown over here as well. It's not just Onana." But you're right, because fans hang on every word that he says, and when you've got a situation like the Bayern game or the Galatasaray game or the Bournemouth game, and you've got a manager sat in front of the press and going, "I thought we played well." Well, the fans know that you haven't played well, and it almost becomes evidence of the manager losing control and losing his view of the game, like you just said, because ultimately the fans, I think, want the manager to back up what they think. They don't want a manager after the Bayern game to say, "I thought we played really well," because I think most United fans can see that they didn't. They've gone out of Europe having had 1 shot on target. So there is a balance there, and it's a balance that he's going to have to get right. I mean, I certainly don't think that Ten Hag is going to get sacked because he says the wrong things in press conferences, but it does all play a part. I know that with the end of Rangnick, the club didn't like a lot of the things that he was saying after matches.
No surprise there. Was it open heart surgery? We need 10 new players and all that.
The same happened with Jose.
Yeah, of course.
Again, there were bigger issues there. Obviously, the dressing room had just disintegrated at that point. But when they were talking to Jose about the reasons why they needed to let him go, one of the things that came up was all of his public comments, and that they felt like it just wasn't a fair reflection of what was happening on the pitch. So it is a fine line, and he does have to be careful, because of course he wants to keep players on side because he needs the players to play well at the weekend, but also he can't be seen to be saying things that just blatantly are not true. So I feel for him in that sense, because I imagine his natural reaction is to take a lot of responsibility on himself, but he's also not on the pitch.
No.
It's not his fault that his 3 midfielders against Galatasaray get caught on the edge of their box and all of a sudden Galatasaray score. That's just a breakdown of what's happening on the field. I mean, Pep Guardiola says it quite a lot, that there's only so much a manager can do. You can prepare players and you can set them up in a tactical system that you think is going to work. Once the whistle goes and they're on the pitch, it's basically organised chaos. You're relying on the players to be intelligent enough to kind of make decisions on their own. And if the players can't do that, more often than not, then you get beat. And it puts a manager in a very difficult position, because a manager is the guy that comes out after the game and has to explain it.
Yeah, and you never see players get sacked halfway through the contract, do you? Managers go left, right and centre. I think as well, people, for some reason, I don't know what it is, but maybe people's own egos or whatever in social media, and I put myself in that category certainly. We get these ideas about a manager and about anything, and then everything they do and say is just confirmation of that. Yeah. So people, Ten Hag hasn't got any tactics, whatever that sentence means. You see it a lot. The tactics aren't working. This is a tactical issue. And then he comes out and says, "We played well." And people go, "Well, of course he thought we played well because he ain't got any tactics anyway. So this was pretty good by his awful standards." And you think you don't win essentially 3 or 4 Eredivisie on the bounce. I know one was cancelled, but they were top of the league by not knowing football. And I think people allow what is clearly a media tactic, him coming out and saying we were great when we clearly weren't. People allow that to be taken at face value because it confirms to them what they already thought about him, which is he's not good enough and he doesn't know how to change things. But it's interesting to me that we have to take this angle of we can't say anything bad about the players and all this because it's going to hurt their feelings. You think sometimes maybe we need a little bit of that, but obviously we've seen in the past, like you said, United in particular don't seem keen on managers talking that way. Just to sort of push things on a little bit, we are 2 weeks away-ish from the January transfer window. United have just suffered 2 more injuries to Harry Maguire and Luke Shaw. I don't think we have any update on how long they'll be out, but you can assume it's somewhere between 2 weeks and 3 months. Yeah. Already big injuries. Martinez, I don't even know if Malacia exists anymore. Rashford was out. I know it was an illness. A squad that is struggling, Eriksen, Casemiro, etc. It looks to me like a team that could do with a bit of investment in January. whether that be in the loan market like we saw last season, or pick up a bargain here or there. You mentioned before you don't think we'll see a decision on Ten Hag's future until we get Jim Ratcliffe in. All the talk is that it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks once the deal is even signed before Ratcliffe can start pushing the chips around. Are we going to see any involvement in the January transfer window? Because surely the club and Ten Hag is begging for some funds to try and help himself out here, because United are really struggling.
It was certainly their intention, Ineos's intention, to be involved in the January transfer window, but I don't think that. I think it's been delayed longer than they even thought it would be. I think they thought it would be confirmed by now. Obviously, it's a really complicated process. Any of these kind of financial transactions at that level are complicated. And so it's one of those things, it's not done until it's done. I think there's still hope that it may be announced before Christmas. But again, I think at this point, Man United fans are just going to believe it when they see it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
In terms of the January window, the message from the club is that it's business as usual, that the people are still working to do deals in January that they would have been doing anyway, even if Ineos weren't about to come in. I think they think that it's going to be relatively quiet in terms of incomings. They don't like signing players in January anyway, particularly now when you've got an investor coming in who's going to oversee the football side. I think we could see a few outgoings. Sancho is the obvious one. I know that the manager said last week there was still a way back for him. The message after that was that he kind of has to say that. I don't think there's any way back for Sancho at United under this manager. And if an acceptable offer comes in from somewhere, they would look to do that deal. Donny van de Beek is another one, just not playing. I think he's played twice. Clearly not a part of Ten Hag's plans. And then you've got other ones, the likes of Anthony Martial. I know there's been lots of speculation about Varane and Casemiro. I think with those two, it would be more whether they wanted to leave. The interesting thing about this whole thing is that at the start of the season, and we saw it last season, that Ten Hag likes to keep a larger squad, because he assumes that you're going to do quite well in all the competitions and you're going to need to play 60-odd games like they did last season. Well, that's not going to happen now. Being out of Europe reduces the workload by probably, 10 or 12 games. So you end up playing, 50-odd games as opposed to 62 that they played last year.
Out early in the Carabao as well this year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that they're going to knock out of the FA Cup by Wigan, but if you don't have a deep run in the FA Cup, you could end up playing 40, 45 games this season. Which is just nothing like the amount that they played last year. And obviously with fewer games, you need fewer bodies. You just don't have the opportunities. And it may trickle down to the likes of Hannibal or Pellistri or even Ahmad, that these young lads who probably felt that they were going to get a chance here or there, there just aren't going to be the opportunities anymore, because it's not even as if they're doing well enough in the Premier League to kind of rotate. You need to string sort of 12 wins together in the Premier League to get close to being in the top four. So there may not be opportunities for those young lads. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I'm sure they'll be interested in some of those young lads, and interesting to see what they do. I imagine there'll be at least 2 outgoings, Donny van de Beek and Jadon Sancho. But again, it would depend on the offers that come in. The problem that United, and I'm pretty sure that I mentioned this last time I was on here, the problem United have got is the offers that come in. Everyone knows that they don't want Sancho.
Yeah.
So no one's going to come and slap £50 million on the table. They're going to say, I'll tell you what, we'll take him, but you pay all his wages and we're not giving you a loan fee. Well, that doesn't really help anyone.
No.
United have got FFP concerns, and getting some of these lads off the wage bill would free up a little bit of space, maybe ahead of the summer, to give them a little bit more wiggle room. So it is important that they do the right deals. They can't just be seen to be accepting any old offer because they just want these lads out.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough spot we've found ourselves in, isn't it? And this never-ending ownership debacle just adds another layer to it. This is a slightly sort of perverse way of looking at this, but do you think in a way the fact that this Ratcliffe deal is taking so long could almost save Ten Hag's job? That by the time Ratcliffe comes in, we may have, let's say even if we lose against Liverpool, a lot of fans would see that as a moment where a board could act. Theoretically, we saw, Jose getting sacked after the Liverpool game. Yeah. If we get a hammering away at Liverpool of the likes of which we saw last season, that could be a moment where the board go, actually, we need a new manager. It sounds like what you seem to be suggesting is that until Ratcliffe comes in, we're probably going to stall on any kind of decision because he's going to want a hand in it. By the time he gets in January, we could have won 7 or 8 games in a row. Do you think almost that could buy him a bit more time rather than hurting him? A lot of people are thinking, well, Ratcliffe might want a new manager, but I'm looking at thinking the timing of this is terrible. If Ratcliffe was to come in now, Ten Hag might be one of the first names to go.
It's definitely possible. I mean, and again, like that, I think what everyone needs is a bit of clarity over what this deal entails.
Yeah.
You know, how much influence is Ratcliffe going to have? Which appointments is he going to be allowed to make? What decisions are those appointments going to be allowed to make? Is he now going to be the one who hires and fires managers? Is he going to be the one that signs off on player transfers? Until we see exactly how this is all going to work, I think it's really, really hard to tell. Right. You know, there's a similar situation in America at the moment with the Dallas Mavericks, I think, where their majority owner has sold the majority of that team to another party, but he's going to have a minority stake but still control the team. And there's even question marks in America about how that's going to work, because it's such a strange partnership. Because usually, you know, the majority owner of a sports team makes the big calls. Well, with the Dallas Mavericks, that's not going to happen anymore. Here, it's going to be the reverse of that. The minority owner is coming in to make these football decisions. So until we actually see what's going to happen, it's really hard to tell. But I think you might be right that, you know, say they do get a kick in against Liverpool on Sunday. You know, historically, that would be a point at which a board may say, "Oh, I can't take any more of this. You're out of the Champions League. We're not in Europe. We've lost a load of money from not being in Europe. You've got battered at Liverpool. Really sorry, but it's time to go." Well, are the Glazers going to want to do that when they've got Jim Ratcliffe waiting to come in, who's in theory going to want to say on these things? Probably not. I just think it just feels chaotic to me again. I always remember years ago Ed Woodward having a few journalists in and being really keen to stress that, you know, that his big thing was he streamlined the decision-making process at Man United, that they felt that they were too sort of chaotic in the way they made decisions, but now they've got this really clear structure, and that was a great thing because that's what, you know, top clubs needed. Well, fast forward a couple of years and you're inviting another bloke in to make or to have a hand in these big decisions, and until we see how that's going to work, I think it's really hard to predict what might happen. Obviously, in a perfect world, Erik would be winning games and results wouldn't be a problem, and there would be no question mark about his future. Unfortunately, it's just not gotten that way.
Can we end on anything positive? Is there like a good, like, oh, here's a nice, and finally, for, you know, it's Christmas after all. Is there a good way we could end this where it's like, right, it's a good time to be a Man United fan?
I actually think he might turn it around, in fairness.
There we go. This is what I wanted. Go on.
I hope that he does.
Yeah.
Because I think he's the right man for the job. I like him personally. I think he's good with the media. You know, obviously, you would never wish Man United to go out of Europe, but now they're going to have a situation where they're going to have 3 weeks, and you would like to think that maybe that time on the training pitch will help them play it, you know, be a bit more sort of organised, and you see a few more patterns maybe in the Premier League games at the weekend. They did go on a big long winning run at the end of the second half of last season. They were consistent. I know he said that now they're not good enough to be consistent, but at the end of last season they were consistent. They did string a big long winning run together. There is still a chance that they could get to the FA Cup final. Obviously, he's going to play very, very strong teams in the FA Cup. You'd think, you know, there is a chance that, you know, win a few games, you get right back in the top 4 race. You comfortably finish in the top 4. You have a good run in the FA Cup, and suddenly things look a little bit better. You know, Jim Ratcliffe comes in and sorts out the football side. His appointments work, and you see what Erik can do with a functioning football side of the business. Obviously, it's all doom and gloom at the moment, but I'd like to think there is a silver lining somewhere. The problem is, I'm sure that we've had this conversation with every single manager post Fergie.
We have, but I like that, and I agree with you. There's still a chance that once we get, you know, the things above him aren't very good. The things underneath him, just in terms of personnel and injuries, aren't very good. If we can get one or both of those things almost up to sort of full speed, maybe we can actually see. I feel like we can't even see what Ten Hag's potential as a manager is yet.
Well, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we haven't seen how good he could be as Man United manager. Maybe when the conditions at that club are perfect for a manager, then we'll see. And if he still is struggling for results, then fair enough. I think it's a little bit early just yet to be talking about sacking a manager who did really well last year and has obviously got, you know, he's done a good job at Ajax. So I'd like to think there was still time for him to turn things around. because ultimately, I don't know where they go from here. If he's not the right man,
I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, we've seen this pattern repeating itself over a decade. No doubt Jose Mourinho is a good manager. Van Gaal, I mean, even Solskjaer, and none of them turned out to be good enough. We have to stick with Ten Hag is my thoughts. Thank you very much, Rob, for coming on. Thank you for watching at home. Make sure you check out Rob, of course, on social media on ESPN.com as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Hit subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you in a bit.